I was holding my own birthday plate when my father raised his glass and thanked everyone for supporting the real family. The room stilled in that polite way people use when they aren't sure if something is a joke. No one corrected him. My mother kept smiling. My sister looked down. I stood there waiting for my name to be said, for someone to notice me. No one did. The silence closed around me like a door, and I understood I was being left out on purpose in front of everyone who should have stopped it. No one said anything after that night. No one mentioned what happened. The house returned to its usual rhythm the next morning. My mother moved through the kitchen like nothing had shifted. My sister scrolled through her phone at the table, occasionally smiling at messages I would never see. My father read the newspaper, turning each page slowly, as if the sound itself confirmed his place in the room. I waited for something. Not an apology. Just acknowledgement. It didn't come. Instead, my father asked if I could handle a few errands before the weekend. His voice was calm, casual, like he was speaking to someone dependable, not someone he had erased in front of a room full of people. I said, yes. I always said yes. That was the role I had. Learned without anyone explaining it. I filled gaps, I fixed things. I made sure everything ran smoothly so no one had to think about it. And in return, I stayed out of the way. It had always worked like that. That afternoon, I went through the guest list. From the party, noting who had been invited, who had attended, and who needed follow-up messages. My father liked things organized. He liked control, but not the effort it took to maintain it. That part was mine. When I brought him the list, he barely glanced at it before handing it back. "Send the thank you notes," he said. "From me." I nodded. There was a moment where I thought he might look up. Maybe meet my eyes. Maybe recognize that I had been standing there the night before, just a few steps away from him. He didn't. Later that week, I overheard him on the phone with a colleague. He was describing the dinner, the conversations, the opportunities it had created. His voice carried easily through the hallway. It was a family event, he said, very close-knit, just the important people. I stopped walking. There was no hesitation in his voice, no sign that he was adjusting the story or leaving anything out. To him, this was accurate. I leaned against the wall, listening as he continued. My wife handled most of the hosting. My daughter was there too, of course. A pause. Small laugh. Yes, she's doing well. I waited. He didn't correct himself. He didn't add anything. He moved on. I stayed there for a few seconds after the call ended, staring at the floor like it might explain something. But it didn't. That was the first time I realized it wasn't just about that night. It was about the version of the family he carried into the world, the one that didn't include me unless I was useful and, even then, only in ways that stayed invisible. That evening, my mother asked if I could help prepare for another small gathering. Just a few people, she said. Nothing like before. I agreed. Of course I did, as I worked in the kitchen. I noticed how everything had already been planned. The menu, the seating, the timing. My mother moved through it all with quiet precision, but she never asked for my input. She only gave instructions. "Make sure the glasses are polished," she said without looking at me. I nodded. There was a point where I almost said something. Not about the party, not about the phone call, just something small, something simple, like asking if she needed anything else. But I stopped myself. I already knew the answer. The truth was, I wasn't part of the conversation unless something needed to be done. And even then, it wasn't really a conversation, it was a direction. That night, as I stood at the edge of the room again, watching another version of the same gathering unfold, I realized something, quietly, without anger or surprise. They hadn't chosen to forget me. They had chosen not to include me at all. And that choice was consistent, careful, and completely normal to them. It would have been easier to believe that night was an exception. A single moment that slipped out of place. But once I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee the pattern that had been shaping itself around me for years. I started noticing it in small memories first. Things that had never felt important enough to question at the time. Like how my sister's mistakes were always explained, softened, reframed into something understandable. If she forgot something, she was overwhelmed. If she broke something, it was an accident. If she hurt someone, there was always a reason. That made it forgivable. When it was me, there was no explanation, just quiet correction, or worse, silence that stretched long enough to feel like judgment. I remembered being younger, standing in the same kitchen after dropping a glass. It had shattered. Across the floor, loud enough to bring everyone running. My mother looked at the mess, then at me, and said nothing. My father sighed, turned away, and told someone else to clean it up. Not me. Someone else. I stood there while another person swept up what I had broken, as if even my mistakes didn't belong to me. At the time I thought it was kindness. Now I understood it differently. I wasn't being protected, I was being removed. The same thing happened with achievements. When I did well in school, the conversation shifted quickly, a short nod, maybe a brief good. Before attention moved somewhere else, there was no space for it to matter. But when my sister succeeded, it filled the room. It became a story, something to repeat, something to celebrate. In front of others, I learned early not to bring things up, not to interrupt the balance that already existed. It wasn't spoken, but it was understood. There was a version of the family that worked, and I wasn't necessary to it. Even at gatherings, I had a role, but it was always just outside the frame. Setting things up, making sure everything ran smoothly, being useful without being visible. People got used to it. I got used to it. If someone needed help, they called me. If something went wrong, fixed it. If everything went right, it simply continued without mention. I didn't resent it at first. It felt like purpose, like I had found a way to belong without asking for anything in return. But nights like that, one exposed the truth behind it. Belonging wasn't something I had negotiated. It was something I had quietly given up. There were moments scattered over the years where I almost stepped out of that role. Times I spoke a little louder, stayed in the room a little longer, waited to be included, instead of leaving early. Those moments never lasted. They were met with the same subtle resistance. A conversation that moved around me. A decision made without me. A look that said I had misunderstood my place. No one corrected me directly. They didn't need to. The system worked because it was never acknowledged. That was the part that stayed with me after that night. Not just what my father said, but how easily everyone accepted it. No confusion, no discomfort, no correction. It fit. That meant it had always been there, quietly shaping everything. I thought back to all the times I had questioned myself instead, wondered if I was too sensitive, too distant, too quiet, if maybe I had created this space without realizing it. But patterns like this don't build themselves alone. They are repeated, reinforced aloud. And I had been allowing it too. Not by choice, but by habit, by staying, by adjusting. By continuing to show up in a role that required less and less of me each time. That realization didn't come all at once. It settled slowly, like something heavy finding its place. And once it did, it changed the way everything felt. Not dramatic, not immediate, just different enough that I couldn't go back to not seeing it. For the first time, I started to understand that what happened in that room wasn't the beginning of something, it was the confirmation of something that had already been true for a long time. The boundary wasn't crossed all at once. It moved slowly, like everything else in that house. A shift, Then another until one day there was nothing left to step back onto. He didn't usually ask for me directly, so I went without thinking too much about it. The room smelled the same as always. Paper dust, something faintly sharp from the polish on his desk. He didn't look up right away. "There's a document I need you to sign," he said, flipping through a folder as if the conversation had already been agreed to. I stayed near the door. "What kind of document?" "Just a transfer temporary. It makes things easier." Easier for who wasn't something I asked out loud. He slid the paper across the desk and finally looked at me. Not impatient, not warm, just expecting. I stepped closer and read enough to understand what it was. Property, my name being. "Move to her?" I asked, though I already knew. "It's practical," he said. "Everything stays within the family." The same words used the same way, but they didn't sound the same anymore. I felt something quiet settle in my chest, not anger, not shock. Something steadier than that. "I don't understand why it needs to be in her name," I said. He leaned back slightly, studying me as if I had asked a strange question. "Because she's the one building a future here." The sentence didn't rise. It didn't fall, it just landed. "And me?" I asked. He didn't answer immediately. Not because he was thinking, because the answer didn't require it. "You'll be fine," he said. It wasn't reassurance. It was dismissal shaped to sound like care. I looked down at the paper again. All the language was clean. Formal, designed to make the decision feel like structure instead of removal. For a moment I imagined signing it, letting it pass through me the way everything else had. Quietly, without resistance. Another adjustment. Another piece of myself folded into something that worked better for everyone else. That version of me still existed, but it felt distant. "I'm not signing this," I said. The words didn't come out strong. They didn't need to. They were clear enough. The room shifted in a way I had never felt before. Not loud, not